Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video we're gonna be making like button effects. So let's say you hover over a button on your screen, it's gonna get bigger, and if you click on it, it's just gonna like shrink down, something along those lines. You can obviously modify this however you want. So let's get started. So first thing I need to do is actually make my UI. So in Starter's UI, I'm just gonna hit the plus, insert a screen's UI. You can rename this by right clicking it or pressing rename or pressing F2. I'm just going to rename it main, and I'm going to insert a text button by hitting the plus and a image button. And while I just align these here, I do want to say two things. I might not be uploading full-length videos for a little while since I am going on vacation. I know I don't have a good upload schedule, but I'm working on it. And please check the pinned comment, as I just released a new game and I would like reviews on it. So yeah, let's continue. So once we have both of our buttons here, this is going to work for an image button and a text button. And just to show, it'll even work if the frame or the button is in a frame. So I hit the plus and inserted a frame. Just going to make this like this, and I'm going to hit the plus on the frame and insert a text button, and then I'm just going to put this here. Just scale up the text. Actually, I'm just going to change the background color just so it's a little bit more noticeable. So here we have an image button, a text button, another text button, except this one is inside of a frame. And so to begin, we want to add in local script inside of our main screen GUI, or you can put it in starter GUI. Just make sure it's not in any frame or anything. It has to be in starter GUI or inside of your screen GUI. So I'm just going to put it inside of starter GUI. I'm going to hit the plus and insert a local script. And now I'm going to rename this local script to, let's say, UI effects. Or let's just do button effects since it's specifically for buttons. So we can start off by removing what's already there. And we want to start with our variables. So our first variable is just going to be for the screen GUI or for the starter GUI. So we're just going to do local, I'm just going to say background, since this is kind of like the background and stuff. Let's just do background equals script.parent. So background is going to be equivalent to script.parent, which, well, the script's parent is starter GUI. So background equals starter GUI. So all we have to do is type in background, and this is basically typing this out just shortened. It's basically like an abbreviation, like people say LOL for laugh out loud. That's basically what this is. So now we're gonna get a service in the game called tween service. We're gonna do local tween service equals game get service tween service. So we're getting a service from Roblox Studio itself, or that's in Roblox, and it's called tween service. Basically what this does is makes it so the button doesn't just instantly become bigger. It's gonna smoothly become bigger, since it might look a little weird if it does instantly become bigger. So now we're just gonna get user input service. So we're just gonna do local UIS equals game get service user input service, or we could put this all out, user input service. I'm just gonna capitalize this. So user input service is basically, let's say when the player presses W, that's going to send an input to here. So we can basically get whichever input is sent from the player. So even if the player clicks or anything, we can check what they did and like do stuff accordingly. So now we actually have to make our tweens for our stuff to scale up and scale down and everything. So what we're going to do is do local, and here we're going to create a new tween. So this is going to be like tweening in, or say, I'll explain it once we finish. Let's do tween info in equals tween info dot new. And now here we can put our parameters. So this is making tween info. Basically here we can set how fast we want it to go, what type of style, like do we want it to bounce, or do we want it to go like very smooth in a straight line? Do we want it to repeat? Do we want it to basically finish and then reverse back to what it was before? So Just to make this easier to read, I'm going to hit enter in these brackets, and that's going to drop it down here so I can put all of our information here. So the first parameter, as you can see, is the time. I'm not sure if you can see this, but there might be a little pop-up that says all of the parameters. The first one is how long you want it to take. I'm going to say like 0.2 seconds. Then make sure you add a comma. Now this one is the easing style. This is basically what type of ease you want it to go. I might link a video that shows what each one looks like so you can look yourself, but I'm just gonna do enum.easingstyle. Let's do court. So now we have to determine whether or not we want to tween in or out, or which easing direction, which that will also be in the video I link if I do link it. So we're gonna do enum.easing direction, and I'm gonna do out. You can mess with in or in out, it's up to you, but I'm just gonna do out. And this parameter, if I can show here, is basically the repeat count, how many times we want it to repeat. I don't want it to repeat, so 0. And then do we want it to reverse, or basically go back to the start after it's finished? We do not want it to do that. And do we want a delay before it starts? Our delay is just going to be 0 seconds because I do not want any delay. So just to recap, this is how long it takes to finish. This is the way it looks, or how the tween is done. This kind of affects or influences the way the tween or the easing style. This is how many times it's going to repeat, so it's going to finish, then go back to the start instantly and finish again. This is if you want it to reverse, meaning it'll go from point A to point B, and then it's going to go back to point B after it goes to point A. And this is the delay between it starting. So now that we got tween info explained, we can go ahead and write another tween info. So we're just going to do local tween info, and we're going to name this one out equals tween info.new. And we're going to do probably the same thing. I'm not actually sure if we should do this, but let's just add this in here. Let's just do 0.2. I'm going to do enum. I'm just going to drop this down. enum.easingstyle.court. enum.easingdirection.out. And then 0 false. 0. And actually, my mistake here, we put tween info in and I put tween info out here, but I put out for both of them. I'm just going to change this into in, and that should be our tween info completed. Now we're going to make a few functions which are going to basically play our tweens appropriately. So we're going to do local function, and then let's do play tween. So basically, whenever we call play tween, it's going to do whatever is in between these lines, basically a function, or that's literally what we were making. So I'm going to actually put some parameters. First we want the tween that we are going to be playing, and then we want, let's make playing variables. So I'll explain what we're going to do with this later, but for now let's just do play variable. I'm going to actually change this to playing, actually just keep it as play variable. So here we're going to do if not play variable. So if it is not playing, then we are going to make the tween play. And then, well, we want to set play variable to true. So play variable is basically going to determine whether or not the button is like currently getting bigger, like the person just hovered on it. So if it is not currently getting bigger, then we're going to make it get bigger, and then we're going to set it to true because it's currently getting bigger. And now we're going to do another function. We're going to do local function cancel tween, and we're going to pass the same parameters, tween, and then play variable. And now what we're going to do is if playing variable or play variable, then tween cancel. And then we're just going to do play variable equals false. So this is just so we can stop that tween, and this is so we can start it. Basically, once we type in play tween like this, it's gonna do this code. It's pretty much replace this with this, just shortened down, pretty much similar to our variables. And our parameters, so our first parameter is tween. So let's say well, I'm not going to create a new tween, but let's say this is like tween 1, and then our playing variable is like is getting bigger. So it's going to basically fill in these two and replace, like, play variable here is going to be is getting bigger, as well as here, and tween is going to be tween 1. I hope that makes it at least a little bit more clear for you. So now we're just going to do a quick delay. We want to do a delay to make sure all of this is finished loading and make sure all of the player's UI has finished loading as well, because this script is obviously going to appear first before most of the UI or most of the buttons. So now we're going to loop through all of the buttons that are inside of our starter UI. So we're going to do for underscore in background, because we're just going to get stuff in background, in pairs, script.parent. Well, actually, we can just put in background get descendants do. So we're doing an underscore because we're probably not going to be using this, but we're going to be using background, which is the instance. So we're getting the descendants of background, which is the script's parent, and the descendant is pretty much literally everything inside of here. It's like a family tree. This is a descendant of this. This is basically a child of this, and this is a child of this. So these are all descendants of starter GUI. So we're getting everything inside of starter GUI. And now we're going to do if background. And let's actually change this to maybe from background to button. And I'm just going to do if button is a text button, or button is a image button. And this should be pretty self-explanatory. We're making sure the button is a text button or image button, because just because we're looping through this and we're looking for a button doesn't mean the script's just going to cooperate with us. We actually have to make sure that we're working with a text button or image button, since we do have a frame here, and it might try and make the frame get bigger and stuff when we hover over it or click on it, which obviously we haven't made it, so we can't click on the frame. So now we're just going to make a base size, or we're going to save the original size of the button. So local, let's just do base size, because the first size equals button.size. Just gonna save the size of the button. Now this is for whenever you hover into the actual button. So what we're gonna do is local tween hover. Let's just capitalize this. Tween hover in equals. Now we're gonna go tween service create. So now we're actually creating a tween, and the first parameter is the instance. So what we want to tween, which will be button, which is right here. Then our tween info we made before, and since this is tween hover in, we're gonna do tween info in. And now we're gonna do one more comma, and we're gonna put curly brackets, and here's where we can type in our property. Which what we want to do is type in size, and we want size to equal udim2.new, which is basically a 2D sizing, and we are going to do base size .x.scale, and then let's actually multiply that by, here you can determine how big you want it to get or how small. So this is how big you want it to get when the player hovers over it. So let's do times 1.05 of its original size. So like basically times 5% of its original size. And now we're just going to do base size dot y dot scale times 1.05. So once again multiplying it by that 0.05, and then we can leave our last parameter as 0. And we actually have to put 0 here, because if we go to our property of our image button, and we see we have, so this is basically x scale, x offset, and then this will also be y scale and y offset. So we want to edit the scale, because scale basically makes it so it adapts to the computer or the device's monitor. As you can see, if I do like this, it's not going to adapt, it's just going to get cramped. I will probably leave this plugin in the description, but if we go to plugins and we select our frame, our image button, our text button, and our other text button, we go to plugins and we hit Jacob's UI GUI tools. You might just be able to search this up in the toolbox if I didn't put it in the description, and press offset to scale. Very good plugin, very much recommend. It'll just convert offset to scale, so now as you can see, the buttons and stuff will get smaller and adapt to the device instead of just be huge and cramped in the walls and whatnot, or in the sides. So make sure you're working with scale over here. So now we're going to make our hover out. So local tween hover out equals tween service create. We're going to do our button, and we're going to do our tween info out. And once again, we're going to go to our property and we're going to do size equals base size. This is actually because this is when you let go. So we just want to set it to its original size when you stop hovering completely. And now this is when you press on it. So when you press on it, we're going to make it become smaller. So we're going to do local tween press equals tween service create button. And we're just going to do tween info out. We're going to use our out tween info. I'm going to do size equals udim2.new base size .x .scale times, and now instead of doing like 1, we're going to do 0.95. So now it's going to get 5% smaller instead of 5% bigger. And then obviously we put a 0 because we don't want to set the offset. And then we're going to do base size .y .scale times 0.95 times 0.95, and then once again 0 because we want to set the offset for y as 0. So now we want to make our hovering pressed variables or playing variables and whatnot. So let's do local is hovering equals false. So if hovering is true, then we're just going to set that to true, and local is pressed equals false. So if the player is currently pressing down and they don't let go, we want to make sure it doesn't just become bigger all of a sudden. And now here's for our playing variables. Local hover in, let's just do playing equals false. Local hover out playing equals false, and local press playing equals false. I'll probably explain this a little bit more later because that will make more sense once we actually use it inside of our function. So let's actually begin making stuff happen when our button is pressed, hovered, and whatnot. So we're going to do button.mouse enter connect function. So whenever the mouse enters the button or hovers over it, we're going to do is hovering equals true because we are now hovering, and we're going to call our play tween function tween hover in, and then hover in playing. So we're basically going to be doing all of this except replace this with hover in playing, this with our tween hover in, and this with our hover in playing. So now that should play the tween, and we could just do, say, yeah, let's just keep it there. And what we're gonna do is if button. This is if you want to add extra. I'll actually probably do that in a separate video since that's just to more stylize your UI. You can keep this somewhat like this for now. So now we're gonna do button.mouse leave connect function. This is when your mouse leaves the button or you're no longer hovering. You want to obviously do is hovering equals false, and if not is pressed. Then so if they are not currently pressing down on the button, we're going to do, or we're going to play a tween hover out, and then hover out play, which is going to set this to true or false, and that should be for our hover out. And we're just going to go down here, and now we want to do when the button is actually pressed. So button dot mouse button 1 down, and then, oops, my fault, connect function. This is when the mouse button is down because we don't want it to just go down and then instantly back up. That's why we're not doing mouse button 1 click. We're gonna do is pressed equals true. And then we're going to play tween press, and then press play. And we're going to do one more, which is button dot mouse button 1 up connect function. What we're going to do is pressed equals false, and we're actually going to cancel tween, and we are going to cancel tween press and press play. And then if the player is hovering, then we're just going to play tween hover in and hover and playing. And if they are not, we're just going to do tween hover out hover and play, or let's do hover out play. So basically, if the player is still hovering over after they let go of the button, we want to make it stay big instead of go back down to its base size, or well, its regular size. So this should be it for the script, and this should make it go bigger and smaller. So let's go ahead and go back to our base plate, and let's hit our play button over here. Let's just let this load up. And so we'll give it a second. As you can see, when we hover over a button, it gets bigger, and when we click down on it, it gets smaller. Click, 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 click. As you can see here. You can obviously make it go faster, you can obviously customize it. And if you're wondering why it's coming or like tweening out from the side like this, you can hit stop, go to the properties of your buttons, go right here to properties and search up anchor point. And as you can see, the anchor point, let me select one of them. I'm just going to scale this up a little bit. Oh, it's a little bit more than a little bit, but the anchor point is pretty much up in this corner. If I select this, you can see this little gray space. I'm not sure if you can see it, but that's the anchor point. We want to set it to 0.5, which means it's going to be in the center, and that's where it's going to be tweening now, because if you see over here, it's tweening from that corner. So we're just going to make the anchor point in the middle and put this back in, and then let this do its thing. So now we obviously have to wait a second. As you can see, it is now tweening from the center, and we can hold down on it, let go, tween down, or hold down, let go, and as you can see, it gets bigger. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm sorry I'm not going to be uploading for a little while. I will be trying my best to upload like as many shorts as I can, just so when I do get back, you guys can give me ideas for stuff I should upload, and then I could just mass upload a bunch of videos in the span of a month and whatnot. And once again, please check out the pinned comment, or I might just put it in the description, for my new game I released. It is following a trend, so might not be the best game, but any feedback is helpful. So hopefully you guys enjoy, and yeah, see ya.